Okay, we may as well get started. Charlie, good to go?
I am good.
All right, so I'd like to open the meeting of the Finance Committee for Monday, June 21st, 2021. It is 6:01 p.m. Before we dive into the agenda, first, welcome to our new members. I thought I was going to be able to open by saying we had a fully staffed committee since I started the short tenure, but sadly, Martha has decided that she won't be able to continue, so we are down one. That's okay, we still have a quorum. Thank you, Cheryl, for accepting your reappointment, and Joe for taking on my old duties as the clerk.
Yummy.
Yummy, huh? So I think maybe just before we get started, I think just because we got new members and we may have another new one joining tonight or soon, just a reminder, we're appointed, we're not elected. We make recommendations on the budget. We don't set the budget. I think we owe the town our best efforts on this. I think my first full annual town meeting this go around as a finance committee member, I was surprised by how kind of contentious and emotional some of the things got. I think there's some things that we can do to sort of tone that down the next time and just be able to sort of make people more comfortable with kind of our recommendations and what we're doing. We really didn't get a chance to debrief on the annual town meeting. So Charlie, Sandy, anybody, Joe, anything that we should be kind of thinking about as we head into the next cycle?
Well, that you're still in this cycle is the first thing.
That's true.
We are likely to have a special town meeting. This is unofficial in the sense of where we're aiming for, but I expect it to be the day after Labor Day. We have to approve the Silver Lake assessment. The town meeting in Halifax had voted a lesser number. Plimpton and Kingston had voted the number requested. So we're going to have to go back and appropriate the additional funds. In addition to that, there'll probably be a few other articles on the warrant for then. We have one zoning article I know that will come in that is for eliminating the buffer zone around pouring establishments as regarding marijuana establishments, in the sense of right now there's a buffer zone around 500 feet around restaurants with pouring licenses, and the petitioners are asking for the town to change that. So my hope is that between Silver Lake and marijuana, we'll get enough people for a quorum. I certainly don't expect it, obviously, to be as long as it was back in May. So the state budget's going to be, should be finished maybe in the next few weeks. We'll see, but nothing material is going to change on that end. And it's not budget as in the sense of going to town meeting budget, but we will be starting to see some of the ARPA money coming through, both directly through to the town, and it's still unknown whether Plymouth County is going to distribute the money on its own that it's getting to the cities and towns in Plymouth County, or whether they're going to send it back to the state for a redistribution. But the expectation is we'll see about $2.3 million. It shouldn't go for operating. And so if you're going to say, well, let's start hiring people, unless you know you're going to have the money in the following year, there's little point in doing that. We're still working out the eligible activities for that money. The board certainly has not made any decisions in terms of the selectmen. So, you should know that it's going on, and I certainly would hope that all of you, along with everybody else here in Halifax, if they have ideas of how the money can be spent within the limitations of the federal law, that they certainly are very welcome to provide those ideas and suggestions. That's what I've got.
Okay, thank you. So why don't we first officially welcome Michael, welcome John. Why don't we just dive into the budget? And Sandy, first, anything on budgets that we need to cover other than what Charlie just covered?
No, just this time of year, it's important to get the line item transfers and the reserve fund requests done. The budget closes, as you know, on June 30th. We would like to get all of those done beforehand. Sometimes we have a straggler, as long as it's in before July 15th. We can still do it legally. But once that's passed, then if there's someone who hasn't covered a deficit in their line, then we're not looking good for the state. So that's why it's important for us to get these done as they come in.
Okay.
But as far as that, other than that, we're doing all right.
And we only have a couple that need to be passed so far. I'm sure we'll get a little flurry here at the end, but let's see what happens.
We could. We try to obviously try to keep it to a minimum. They're just supposed to be transferring money to use on FY21 expenses, not to purchase things, for next year.
Right.
That's the main thing I always tell them. FY21 money is for FY21 purchases and services, not for FY22. So
got it.
Other than that, we're good.
Okay, thank you. Next up is acceptance of minutes. Any discussion on the 6:14 minutes?
No, okay.
Good. The only question I had when I read it, it wasn't clear from the minutes that John was voted on. There was a lot of discussion around a couple of things, but was a vote taken? I didn't notice.
It was definitely a vote taken by us. Okay. I think the selectman didn't second it, but let me look at the notes and see how I put it. Maybe I just didn't put it clearly.
I thought I saw it in the minutes, but maybe I didn't.
Yeah. No. It's definitely something in there. And I remember it was very choppy, I believe, with the selectman that day. So I just might not have heard the second person second it.
Right.
But
as long as everyone's comfortable, I came late. So as long as everybody's comfortable that item was covered, then I think we're really good.
Yep. I'll add the motion. You're right, Fred, because Gordon made the motion. That's what it was. It went a little out of everybody else's order. So Gordon made the motion, Drew seconded. So that kind of threw it off from normal. Okay.
And I'm Tom, he's Fred. Linda didn't realize she just called me Fred.
Did I do that?
Yeah, that's okay.
Look at that, old habits.
I know. Okay, so I'll call for a motion to accept the minutes of our last meeting held on 6/14. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Okay, let's take a roll call vote. Cheryl?
Yes.
Aye. Joe?
Yes.
Drew?
Yes.
And myself is a yes. I presume Michael and John can't vote on this one, but so we have I guess the motion carries. Okay. Next thing on the agenda was reserve fund transfers.
Hey, Tom, real quick. So Michael and John, are they not sworn in yet?
I am.
No, they are, but they weren't voting members on the minutes.
Oh, for the minutes. Sorry,
right. So everything else we do tonight, Joe, they'll be voting.
Okay, cool.
Let's see. So I came in a bit late last time. Was the reserve fund transfer on the EV charging station? That looked like it was voted last time.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So we don't know. So nothing to do there. So we just have the 3 line item transfers. Is that right, Linda?
And then 2 more were added late today, so I can run through them if you want.
Okay. Shall we just take the votes on these and then we'll run through those 2?
Sure.
Okay. So the first one is to transfer $3,000 from snow and ice removal to streetlights and electricity. Any discussion on that? I presume everybody got the motions earlier from Linda. So just any discussion on that one? Okay, a roll call vote then on a motion. Well, first, can I get a motion to transfer $3,000 from the streetlights account to from snow removal? Sorry. To the streetlights account. Can I get a motion? Thanks. Second?
Second.
Okay, a roll call vote on the motion. Cheryl? I think Cheryl's frozen. Joe?
Yes.
Drew?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Myself is a yes. I think we'll have to have Cheryl abstain. Cheryl, if you can hear us, maybe duck out and come back in.
Okay.
Well, majority on that one, so I think the motion carries. We'll just keep going, and hopefully Cheryl will be able to join us in a second. The second is for a motion to transfer police wages, $5,000 from police wages to police training. Any discussion on the transfer request? Chief Chavez, I was just surprised that we carry ammunition and training budget, but I guess that's where it sits. So a roll call vote. I'm sorry, a motion, if I could get one, to transfer $5,000 from police wages to the police training budget. Did I mix these up? Hang on, guys. Sorry, I think I did.
You just took the third one instead of the second one.
Yeah, yep. I did. Okay. Sorry. So yeah, in terms of the order that they were in. So it's. Let's make sure I've got the right paper in front of me, guys. Bear with me.
What you're saying is correct.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I just went out of order, right? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we want to transfer $5,000 from police wages to the police training budget. Could I get a motion for that?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
And a roll call vote. Cheryl's not back on, so start with Joe.
Back.
Yes.
Oh, Cheryl back?
She's getting back.
Okay. Drew?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Myself is a yes. We'll just keep going. That motion carries, so we'll keep going, and Cheryl, I'm sure, will join us momentarily. Okay, so the third transfer request that we have is to transfer $402.58 from police wages to police chief wages to cover the unanticipated shortfall associated with the declaration of Juneteenth as a federal holiday. Any discussion on the motion? Could I get a motion to do a fund transfer of $402.58 from police wages to police chief wages?
So moved.
Second.
Second? Cheryl, welcome back. Okay,
Yeah.
a vote then, a roll call vote then on the motion to transfer. Cheryl?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Drew?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And myself is a yes. Motion carries. Next up on the agenda was our discussion with.
Hey,
Sorry,
Tom,
Tom.
I think Linda's got two more.
Yep.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. You're right. You've got. I'm pushing through these motions. Sorry about that. So you have two more to describe to us.
I do. So hopefully you got some of you got the email I sent a little after the first email today. But there's one line item transfer for $130 even from the recruitment and employment costs to the selectmen clerical. They said there's an excess balance in recruitment and employment because advertising and medical expenses were less for this fiscal year. And there's the shortage in the selectmen clerical is due to paying the holiday for Juneteenth for the selectmen's assistants. So it's $130 even from recruitment and employment to selectmen clerical.
Okay. Any discussion or questions? No? Then could I get a motion to transfer $130 from the recruiting line item to selectmen clerical to cover the shortfall on the Juneteenth federal holiday?
Second.
Okay, a roll call vote. Cheryl?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Drew?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And myself is a yes, so the motion carries.
Linda, can you send those back out? I never got an email.
Yeah, I didn't either.
I didn't either.
Oh, that's not good. Yes, I will. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll look into it. So The second one is for in the amount of $250 even, going from recruitment and employment costs, again, with the same reasoning, advertising and medical expenses were down, to town administrator salary to cover the deficit in the account for the town administrator's longevity.
All right. Any discussion on the request transfer?
No.
Okay, could I get a motion to transfer $250 from the recruiting line item to town administrator's salary to cover the longevity provisions?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, a roll call vote. Michael?
Yes.
Cheryl?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Drew?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And myself is a yes. That motion carries as well. So I think that covers it, right, Linda?
Yes, those are all the
Okay.
ones I have.
So those were the ones that we have. So next up, I believe on our agenda was a discussion with Todd this evening on joining our august body. Todd, welcome. Usually these are very informal. We really would just love to hear first, thank you for offering to serve. And we'd just like to hear a little bit about your background and kind of what interests you in serving on the Finance Committee.
Okay, sure. Yeah. First, I mean, thanks for entertaining me tonight. I appreciate the invite. So, you know, by way of background, you know, I've lived in the town for about 6 years now. You know, love the town and just looking to kind of give back. I actually was looking to renew my dog's license and stumbled across some postings on the site there where it looked like you guys, you know, needed some help or whatever. So just wanted to offer my, you know, services to, you know, assist the town. I'm very fond of the town. I love the town. So just looking to kind of give back. So, you know, that was my interest. And as far as, you know, background is concerned, so, you know, when I graduated high school, I joined the military, the United States Navy, and served, you know, for a number of years and was honorably and meritoriously discharged. And then, you know, upon my discharge, I actually went back to school. So I got my associate's degree in accounting. Then later on to my finance degree, bachelor's in finance, and then, you know, completing up my MBA currently at the University of Massachusetts. So I have a couple courses left and hope to complete that in the coming months. And so largely over the last 17 years, I've, you know, worked in the investment management space, holding, you know, very senior level positions across multiple, you know, organizations. You know, leading the investment fund accounting functions for GE Pension. Then I, you know, developed a team out in Transamerica Asset Management down in, they were in Florida at the time. They actually since relocated to Denver, Colorado, but built out a fund oversight team there responsible for like vendor oversight and just general oversight of the funds, and served on the, you know, board elected pricing committee and such for the organization. Moved back to Massachusetts back in 2013, and I took on the treasury functions, you know, the budgeting and the expense management of over 25 clients, and led a very large team for a number of years, doing that for about 5 years. And then back in 2017, I actually moved over to where I sit now, which is at JP Morgan. Onboarding the BlackRock, you know, business, which was over $1 trillion in assets. So I led that the treasury onboarding of that function, and then now I currently sit as you know, global pricing control manager across the organization. So leading a team of, you know, across the globe in Singapore, India, and you know, across the United States. So. So have a vast, you know, experience in budgeting and things of that nature. You haven't really served. I did actually fail to mention, I did serve down in Florida as treasurer for some large youth sports organizations. So the Social Longhorns, which, you know, consisted of about 400, you know, kids from both, you know, football and, you know, cheerleading, and so a very large organization, and served the treasurer for that, and then also for you know, a baseball team down there as well. So aside from that, I haven't really, you know, worked or you know, volunteered for the town itself, so it would be, you know, somewhat new to me, but you know, I have I think a good sense, and you know, would obviously bring in a fresh set of eyes and things like that, so I think I could add a lot of value from that perspective.
I think you'd be a great add. The committee, any questions for Todd?
I have one, Tom. This is a question they asked me, so I'll pass it on to you as being the new guy. I'll throw it to you and see what happens. Come around January to May, there's a very large time commitment. And you sound like a pretty busy guy with a pretty important job. Would you be able to give us the kind of time commitment that we would need? It can involve anywhere, I guess, like 1 to 2 or 3, 4 nights a week sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I'm willing to, help, wherever's needed. I mean, obviously, my job would need to come first, obviously. And so, there may be some cases, especially if we're able to continue to leverage Zoom, where I do work in Boston. So sometimes it can be difficult, just getting on a train and making it back for like, say, a 6 p.m. meeting. So, to be open and honest, there could be some challenges with that itself, but, certainly able to work around, that to my best of my ability and help out, to my best, potential. So,
that's a good point. And hopefully the governor just signed an extension for us to use Zoom. Right. Hopefully that'll stay in place for a while, because I know that makes scheduling easier sometimes. And I think it also makes public participation easier as well. So we're hoping.
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, I do have the flexibility to work from home, being that I oversee global teams. So as long as I had notice in advance that there was going to be like a, kind of a mandatory meeting, if you will, I can certainly make the arrangements to be available for that as well. So
we try to plan those out. So that's great.
Sure.
Other questions, crew? Okay. Todd, I think you'd be a great ad. And there's the transition. I was a Wall Street guy. The transition to the municipals is a little tricky, but in Linda, Sandy, and Charlie, so far they've kept me out of trouble. So I'm sure they do the same for you. So I appreciate your time. And if there's no other questions, I think we're good for this evening. We actually have a full billet. Oh yes, Andy.
Tom. Todd, if you do not get on the finance committee, would you be interested in capital planning?
Sure. Yeah.
I think planning committee.
Yeah, I believe I think I was invited to the one tomorrow, I guess, to come to that. So, I'm happy to. I wasn't like set on. I'm just happy to assist wherever the need is. So wherever you need me, just let me know. I guess, and I'm happy to help out.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's great. Sure. Thanks. Any other questions? Okay, Todd, thank you very much. You're welcome to stay, of course. It's a public meeting, so join us for as long as you can, and we'll get back to you soon. We've got sort of new changes that happened even today on the committee, so we'll sort that out and we'll be back to you very quickly. But I know that Sandy needs help on capital planning, and I stood in there for this last round a little bit, and it was interesting stuff. So that would, I think, be a great backup. Per Linda's suggestion, I thought maybe we'd juggle the schedule around a little bit to get some of the housekeeping taken care of, because when we speak with Attorney Bobrowski, that might be more open-ended and might take some time. So I wanted to just jump to the calendar quickly, if I could, and get the committee's views on July and August. It was suggested that while typically we don't meet much in those 2 months, that there are wage and personnel matters that tend to get shoved to the background a little bit, and that we may use some of that time this summer to address some of those issues. Charlie, do you agree? And would that be helpful? Should we consider that for July and August?
Yeah, that would make a lot of sense.
Okay. So I'm not sure we'd need 2 meetings a month in July and August, maybe 1 or 2 in July, and then we get 3 meetings in total in July and August. So for July 12th and 26th, or as examples, just ask the committee if you could be available for those 2 Mondays at 6. Seeing nods, it doesn't need to be a vote. This is just sort of consensus. John, what do you think?
Yeah, especially if Zoom's an option, but either way works, I think, on those 2 dates, so no problem.
Okay. Joe?
12th to 26th of July, yeah, I should be fine.
Okay. Drew?
I don't think I have any conflicts those days.
Okay. And Cheryl?
Yeah, I don't see any problem.
Okay. How
Do
about
you have one on the schedule for next week or no?
Up in the air right now.
Yeah, that one. Yeah,
pencil
so
it in.
actually, since it's coming up on lots of holiday weekend stuff, I was going to propose next that we sort of set that one aside. Sandy, Cheryl, and Linda. Sorry, Cheryl, Linda, and Sandy. Charlie, Linda, and Sandy. Do those meetings work for you on the 12th and 26th?
Yes.
That's fine for me too.
Okay. All right, good. Then those will be our July meetings. And then I propose either the 9th or the 23rd. Actually, not to put Sandy on the spot, but I thought if the 23rd were worked for everyone, that could be, we do both wage and personnel. And we also think about starting to hand out people's assignments for next year, or is that too early for liaison assignments?
Oh, no, I think that's good.
Okay.
Very good.
And we can start picking up our assignments for liaison. So I'm proposing then for August, we just do August 23rd.
Not the 9th?
Go ahead, Joe.
You said not the 9th?
No, because Sandy, is it too early to do not the 9th, but I want to see, is it too early to do the liaison assignments on the 9th?
No.
No.
But I don't know that.
No, I think liaison assignments could be done at any point, right, Charlie?
Right. I mean,
Yep.
I don't think you're not probably going to do too much work with liaisons between the 9th and the 23rd anyway.
Right.
Okay. So why don't we skip the 9th if the 23rd works for everyone, we would skip the 9th.
So I'm going to have a problem the 16th, 23rd, and 30th.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can't do the 23rd.
Okay.
I could do the 9th, but that's going to be my only Monday in August that I'm going to be available.
Got it. Okay. Can we propose the 9th then? How about others? Cheryl?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
That could
I
be me.
may have a
Yeah, so-
conflict for the 9th, but again, remote, I'm sure I could make it work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Drew?
Is there any way? No, we can't. Never mind.
What's that?
No. I was just seeing if there was a different day. I'm just going to have problems for month of August after the week of the 9th for a while.
Gotcha. Do we want to?
Tom, you may want to consider going closer to the end of the month anyways. If you can switch at night, or if you can get most of the group on the 23rd. If Charlie's saying that you might have a special town meeting right after the beginning of September, you might want that late August one to discuss what's coming up.
It's a great point.
Yeah. No.
How's since Joe, it seems like, well, Joe and Michael, you got a problem on the 23rd. Is that the whole week?
It is for me, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got issues pretty much, once I get past the 9th of August, I'm done for the month.
Okay.
So what about the 30th?
It's still going to be busy.
The 30th
is,
I
know what's going on.
You guys don't have to, you got a full board, don't work around me. I'm not back until after Labor Day.
Gotcha. Okay.
I was going to let you guys know as we got closer, but now that we're talking about calendar, the month of August is pretty much out for me.
Okay. Michael, could you do the 30th?
Yes.
Yeah. How about the others? John?
30th.
Okay. Drew?
Yep.
Okay. Sandy, Linda, and Charlie, the 30th work for y'all?
Could be.
I think so.
Done.
Always,
Okay. We'll do
And if I can arrange it, I'll jump on, of course.
Okay. So calendar sorted. Our August meeting will be on the 30th. Wage and personnel matters and liaison assignments will be among the agenda items. Good.
And right now we're 28th, 12th, and 26th, right? For June, July.
28, 12, and 26. Yes.
Okay.
Oh no, let's go back. I'm proposing we cancel the 28th. There's no pressing matters.
We can't. You just need to keep that penciled in. I'll keep in touch with you about that. Okay. That'll depend on what happens with the selectmen's vote of appointing during this week.
Okay.
If it's necessary, we'll have it on Monday night, but hopefully we can keep it super short and just do what we need to do.
Okay. Thank you for that. Okay. So it is, I
would also like to suggest, excuse me, but you may want to reach out to the selectmen for your July meetings if you are going to be doing wage and personnel items. That would be it would be beneficial if they joined you, since it's wage and personnel is handled by both boards.
Sure. We just get it one and done.
I can send an email to them if you want, Tom.
Okay, that'd be great, Linda. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Any correspondence?
I'm just flipping through that. Obviously, we have the information that Mark Bobrowski sent out to all of you. But also, let me see, we just had nothing you really need to do with it, but we got letters from the selectmen just reviewing the appointments that we made at the other meeting. And then the only other thing was what came in fact, today, which is just so you all know what's going on. Martha wanted to just give her sincere apologies. She rather unexpectedly submitted an offer on a house in Plimpton, and it was accepted. So she's going to be moving to Plimpton probably within the month. So she felt that she just shouldn't even, take up a spot that somebody else could start and then jump on. So that was the only other piece of correspondence.
Got it. Thank you. So if we go back now to the original order of the agenda, we're having our initial discussion this evening with Attorney Bobrowski on zoning bylaw revisions. And I think with that as simple introduction, I will turn it over to Attorney Bobrowski to get started.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everybody. I can see you run an efficient meeting down there in Halifax. Congratulations on that. And I hope to do the same when it's my turn to take the microphone. Joining me this evening is Judy Barrett from Barrett Planning Group in Duxbury, and she's going to talk as we move along a little bit about the public participation segment of the contract. So this is a typical kickoff. I usually take your zoning bylaw, go through it with an eye towards deficiencies, but also for things that are good, that are fine. Your bylaw is surprisingly well thought out in terms of the coverage, subject matter. I think it's a little behind the times, but things have changed so fast in the last 18 months. Who could have possibly imagined what would have happened to us here? I mean, I've done other towns down your way. I did Middleborough maybe 10 years ago. That was awful. It was one of the worst bylaws I've seen. I don't even think they had an electronic version of it at the time. And I've also done Rehoboth, towns a little further north of you, like Easton, and then up and down the Route 24 corridor, Holbrook, Hanson many years ago when Noreen O'Toole was their planning director. So I'm familiar with the area. I'll get to know the town a little bit better once I start driving down that way to go to my boat in Buzzards Bay. Haven't done that much yet. I bring to the table, a wealth of experience. I was just yesterday out, and I can't believe it, but I've actually written the zoning in
Again.
Lee, Lennox, Great Barrington, Ovens. And so.
Hey, Mark, we're having trouble with your bandwidth. Maybe we'll listen carefully, but turn your camera off so we can get some bandwidth. Looks like your home internet's giving us trouble.
Mine, are you saying?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you keep cutting out.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's maybe you shut the video
Turn the
down,
camera
Mark.
off. We'll get some bandwidth for your
Okay.
audio. Good.
I didn't know. That's the first time that's ever happened, or the first time anybody's ever told me. So I've probably done this in about 110, 120 cities and towns at this point. The biggest city I've ever worked in is Lowell, and the smallest town I've ever worked in was Mount Washington, who just revamped their zoning this past spring. They're in the corner of the state with Connecticut and New York. I think the easiest thing to do would be to sort of give you a prelude to what the program will look like as we go forward. We're shooting for Springtown meeting next year. So what I typically do after tonight is a series of 4 meetings which are theme oriented. And the first meeting will be everybody's job description. So we'll go through the building department's regulations for enforcement and permitting. We'll look at the rules for variances, special permits, and site plan review. For example, I noticed in your site plan review section, that you don't really have any provisions in there about appeal, which are important, because if you don't put those into your bylaw, the appeal of a planning board decision goes to the zoning board of appeals, and it's just a completely wrong way to do it. If you put something in establishing jurisdiction originally with court, the courts now will honor that, and it's a much better answer. The second theme meeting is to take the use table and the definitions and to match them up. Just for example, I looked at your definitions, and while you have many definitions that are related to things like terms already defined in the state building code, you don't really define many uses that are principal in nature, like retail, office, a restaurant. Those definitions are pretty much missing. The third meeting, and this is where Judy will come in handy for public participation, focuses on residential aspects of the zoning bylaw. And it's here where we can probably make some substantial changes policy-wise if the board wants to go along with that. So open space residential development is something that the governor put into his recent bill back in January. But there's also lots of other alternatives like accessory dwelling units. That was in the legislation as well. B&Bs, short-term rental regulations, home occupations, virtually anything that touches a house will be the third meeting. And then the fourth meeting is non-residential. You've got some decent, your sign regulations go on forever, but your parking regulations could use a little support. There really isn't much regulation of other aspects of a general nature, lights, noise, landscaping. So we'll talk about whether or not you want to add those for commercial, most likely. And this, in terms of building support for that's the public participation piece that will kick off Judy's effort. When I'm done with those 4 meetings, I disappear for a month and I put together a first draft. The first draft is coded, but not everything is in it. If I'm not changing your floodplain, and I'm probably not, then I just show you where it's going to go, but I don't take the effort to renumber it at that time. I want to get the changes into the first draft. Second draft is all in. And again, it's coded. So if it's new text, it's yellow. If it's existing text, it's black. And if it's strikeout, you can see it. People are always asking as you go through this process, well, what did you change? It's a whole lot easier to just hand them the coded version and they can see for themselves what the differences are. And then typically the third draft is the one that at least by contract, is allegedly going to finish the job, but it never does. I think right now in Manchester by the Sea, I'm on the 9th draft. I know I'm on the 13th draft in Bridgewater. Judy's helping me there as well. I'm now in Medford, and I believe I'm already on the 7th draft. So my goal is to get you to the finish line. That's all I care about. If it takes 9 drafts, what do I care? The changes after the third draft are pretty small and simple. And so I think the record at Haverhill, it took 7 years and 18 drafts, but they passed it in November of this last year. So I can guarantee you that by the end of this week, collectively, we'll be the only people in town who have ever read the zoning bylaw in its entirety. And I don't know whether you can brag about that or it's something to lament, but we will definitely have gone through every word. I think probably the easiest thing to do in terms of making some progress is if I could share the screen. I'm going to put the bylaw up and I'll kind of scroll through it and make some changes to or show you the changes that I'm suggesting. So who's sharing screens?
So Mark, you're probably going to have to turn your video back on in order to do that.
Oh, okay. All right. Well,
sorry, Mr. Chair, I didn't mean to jump in, but
no, that's okay.
I've been down this.
I'm not sure that it's necessary, but at the bottom of the screen, I think is sharing enabled, Charlie?
Got it. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So right at the bottom of the screen, Mark, you'll see the share screen button.
Yep. No, I just got to find you. There you are. Okay, can you see that?
It's coming up.
Yep.
There we go.
All right, so I'm on my memo. I'm going to just before we get scrolling here, I'm just going to say a couple of things. I usually use the table of contents that you see on page 1 of my memo. This has worked pretty well. I didn't see anything in your bylaw that would necessitate adding a different chapter. For example, Manchester by the Sea has both a wind energy bylaw and a solar energy bylaw. So I created an energy chapter there, but that's unusual. Medford has development impact fees. That was an unusual new chapter. This is kind of basic 101. I'll just point out the definitions come at the end. Your definitions are on this page. My preference is to put the definitions at the end like a glossary so that I can just flip to the back, knowing that the definitions are there when I need them, instead of hunting and pecking through the center of the document looking for them. And I always make the recommendation that all definitions go in the back. For example, your floodplain bylaw has a whole lot of separate, independent definitions that only apply in the floodplain. I would put them all in the back under the floodplain as a main heading in the definitions, and then indent the specialized definitions that just apply there. But we can work that out as we go through. As I did this article by article, so sections 1 and 2, just a minor point. I like to add the Home Rule Amendment, which is a source of authority. You can do anything in Massachusetts which isn't preempted by or inconsistent with a general bylaw or constitutional provision. And towns have used that with great success to be imaginative and to regulate in ways that you would never have expected. For example, on the Vineyard, they used zoning to create resident youth lot programs for people over the age of 21, under the age of 30. This is Chilmarks I'm thinking of. And the youth lot is income qualifying for people who have grown up in the town so that they can stay there. When Jacqueline Kennedy was buying land in the 1970s on the Vineyard, how did you grow up in Chilmark and afford a piece of land so that you could live where your parents lived? Those youth lots were a wonderful social experiment, but they were adopted through zoning, and they were reviewed by the court and approved by the highest court in the Commonwealth. The material on page 3 of my memo just repeats the uncodified section 2A of chapter 40A, which was last done, believe it or not, in 1976. That's how long it's been since there's been reform of the Zoning Act. And it shows it. It's worn, and it's, there used to be a gentleman who worked for the Commonwealth named Don Schmidt, and he and I did a lot of work together, and we fancied ourselves to be the plumbers. We knew that the machinery was broken, but we knew where the brakes were and we knew how to fix them. And it hasn't changed a bit since then, and he retired 15, 20 years ago.
That's right.
It's a sad affair that the state hasn't gotten its act together. Okay, the first thing, I'm going to skip the definitions. I've already had a little bit of say about them, but if you just, as we scroll through, you're not going to see things like, you've got adult covered, and you did it correctly. Attic, barn, basement, those are state building code terms. Body art, buffer zone, but look for things like gasoline station or automotive repair or retail or restaurant. They're just really not here. So my goal, that's a statutory definition as well, kennel. My goal is to add a definition for everything in your use table so that you're not trying to guess or forcing the building commissioner to guess at what you meant. When you get to this section on districts, in every district, you have a purpose enunciated. And I find that this is more trouble than it's worth. If you give a lay person something that says that the industrial district purpose is to provide for industrial uses, higher impact commercial uses, and adult establishments, somebody's going to read that at some point and say, well, what about research and development? It doesn't fit industrial, and it's not a higher impact commercial use. I don't think you can do it there, even if the use table says that you can. That people will actually pick apart that kind of wording in your purpose announcements. And I find this is nothing but trouble. So my recommendation is to let the district speak for itself. Where does it speak for itself? It speaks for itself in the use table, and it speaks for itself in the dimensional table. And that's what the district is all about. That's the purpose of the district, to allow those uses with that intensity. And the wording here just kind of gums it up, in my opinion. Judge Long recently had a case in the land court, and he basically said, I see these definitions of purpose, and I'm just going to ignore them and move on. And I thought that was the right way to handle it.
Mm.
The wireless, stuff like wireless, which is a specialized district, I'm not going to change anything unless you tell me that it's broken. I'm going to put it somewhere other than in districts. I'm going to put it in a separate section in which general regulations of this sort, and they would include things like solar, wireless, earth removal, all of those things go into their own chapter. So my goal would be to move these into a general chapter of regulations. I think you got this adequately covered. I don't know who's keeping score in terms of the map, but every time you change a district or establish a new district, it has to be added to the map. I did Natick zoning, and they had 100+ map changes since 1964. And when push came to shove, we found out that only about half were on the map. So it put a huge halt on the program. We had to go back to the library, look at the town reports, and collect all of those, and then make sure that the cartographer was doing it correctly. I think that you've got the right approach here with table of use regulations. I'm going to take these things one at a time as we go through. So agricultural uses are protected under the state law. If your bylaw is otherwise silent and the farm is 5 acres, it's allowed. And it also has been amended recently to talk about 2 qualified acres. A qualified acre is an acre of land on which there's $1,000 of gross proceeds annually. Otherwise, a farm is just a farm. I mean, it could be an acre. So what kind of farm do you want? Agriculture includes pig raising. So there needs to be some clarity added here under agricultural uses as to what you can and can't do. Just for an example, you don't allow piggeries or swine, but if I've got a 5-acre farm, I am allowed to do it. You can't stop me. It's a 5-acre qualified protected farm under Chapter 40A, Section 3. You've got farms with livestock and poultry. Probably need to talk that through a little bit more. And then these things are just fine. Marijuana is not protected agriculture under Chapter 48, Section 3, but it is agriculture, as agriculture is other place defined in the state laws that pertain to agriculture. So we'll talk that through as well. I don't know what you allow for multifamily, but the state is just in the new governor's regulations said that if you do mixed use or multifamily in eligible locations and you provide at least 10% affordable housing, then you can vote those districts by a simple majority vote at town meeting instead of a 2/3 majority vote. And the special permit, if you choose to use special permit, is as well a simple majority of the planning board or the Board of Appeals or the Board of Selectmen instead of a supermajority. Some towns are also charged. I don't think you're a MBTA town.
Yes, they are. They are.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So there's another mandate in the governor's housing bill that MBTA towns zone appropriately at transportation nodes for multifamily housing. And if you don't, none of this is worked out yet. So don't get afraid overnight. But if you don't, you're going to lose eligibility for certain discretionary state funding programs. Judy, do you know what's going on at all with that?
Well, they're issuing guidance documents as questions come up from municipalities, and there are currently 3 guidance documents. The current thinking is, unless it's really obvious, like around your train station, that you need to be prepared to defend a zoning change that you assumed you could do on a simple majority vote by submitting information to the Attorney General explaining why you did it and citing the provisions of the Housing Choice Bill that you relied upon. So it's very in flux, and I think, Mark, we're probably going to be waiting for MBTA community guidance probably until late fall. Yeah. There's a lot of issues.
Well, it's reminiscent of what happened back around 2004 or 5 when they passed Chapter 40R as a right on the budget.
Right.
And we had to wait a year for the regulations for Chapter 40R before anybody could do anything. So that's all playing out as we go through this process. My usual focus in a use table review is on things like institutional uses, which are related to the statutory references here. So as I said in my memo, I like to just put what the statute says. The statute here, instead of calling it what you call it, a church or a place of worship, just says land or structures for religious purposes. And then with regard to colleges and schools, these would be, as the statute says, educational purposes on land owned or leased by the Commonwealth or by a religious sect or denomination or by a nonprofit. I was just talking this afternoon with the Berkshire Natural Resources Council. They have hiking trails all throughout Berkshire County. They're a nonprofit. Somebody sued them in the governor's, former governor of Deval Patrick's town of Richmond, and they allege that hiking is not allowed in the zoning bylaw. There's a parking lot at the end of a road, and I'm sure it's New Yorkers who have moved there, and they are now complaining that there's too many cars, 6, in the parking lot. And the Berkshire Natural Resources Council convinced the building inspector that it was a protected educational use. The ZBA denied that. They reversed, and now they have to go to court. So this is a landmark case, is a private nonprofit educational parking lot qualifying under the Dover Amendment. And this is always a field of great interest to me. Judge Shire at the Land Court had a case as she was exiting to retirement in which a therapeutic program at McLean Hospital, she rejected it as educational. When it went to the Supreme Judicial Court, they completely headed in the opposite direction and said that the difference between therapy and education is so minute as to be indiscernible.
That was the Lincoln case, right? Was that Lincoln? Yeah.
Yeah. And then there was another case a few years ago in which Regis College decided that they would have an educational use in which 55 and older people would buy townhouses and get studied by the Regis students and at the same time take classes. But the ties to an educational purpose as a primary use were too weak, and the court threw that out. So all that stuff falls within these very simple words here: schools, public, religious, sectarian, or private. Also want to talk about town things here. You don't really seem to be giving yourselves any favor. Institutional uses include town of Halifax uses. If you don't give yourself an exemption, and you don't have to, but if you don't even think through the process other than public buildings and premises for governmental use, you're going to lose out on things like cemeteries, or it just needs to be clear what is exempt and what is not.
Right.
And then on things like public utilities, I always just simply call them essential services. These are quasi-monopolistic things like telephone exchanges or water towers. And I put them on special permit. If you play too much hardball, they can go to DPU or DTE. But it's better to put them on special permit so you have some negotiations about what they're going to do. Here's where you begin in the commercial uses with things that you just don't define. What's a retail store? A retail store could be Walmart. Judy and I worked on a Walmart in Leicester, 220,000 square feet. Is that what you want? Or do you want retail to be limited in size? Some towns cap retail stores at 50,000 or 60,000 square feet. Some towns divvy up retail into 3 different sizes: neighborhood, convenience or neighborhood, regional, and then larger scale. Medford is going for the first time to neighborhood business at about 5,000 square feet, local business at about 10 to 15,000 square feet, and anything over that is major. I know very few towns that will allow retail as of right when I might get a Walmart. Just something to think about. When we do the use table, I want you to be political as well as legal, and I want you to view this as a once-in-a-generation opportunity to go through everything in here and to see whether or not your fear factor goes up. My fear factor goes up if I see something with a Y that could be, we're talking 5 acres under roof. I mean, the same thing is true as you move down through something like wholesale. Let me get to the commercial stuff because that was something that I had seen there too.
Excuse me, Mark. I've got to run, so Thank you. Appreciate it. And I'll see everybody next week.
Thanks, Joe. So when I get to light industrial, manufacturing, storage, I would assume that this would include warehouses somewhere with a Y. I'm doing 1,000,002 square feet right now in Charlton at 60 feet, at 60 feet in height.
You're working on that project too?
There's 2 projects, Judy.
Oh, that's right. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, I couldn't do the second one because my first client wouldn't let me.
Yeah.
But there's 1 million. I'm doing a logistical project on the Sturbridge line, which is 1,000,2 square feet of logistical space.
Yep.
And that's what's the world. That's the world now. That's what's coming. And they're all looking for a Y like that. They're all looking for a Y. I've got a friend who's a lawyer up in North Andover. He represents Amazon. He's basically had to give away his other clients because he doesn't have time for them anymore.
That's right. I worked with him too.
John?
I know. It's hard.
Yeah, it's incredible. So
they're all up and down the South Shore on Route 3.
Yeah.
Looking at the different interchanges to find any industrially zoned land.
They're actively looking.
Yeah.
And the other thing that's coming with the affordable housing census changes, I mean, I've done this already months ago. You look at the subsidized housing inventory for anybody that's at 10.5% today is going to be at 9.5% tomorrow. So that is coming, and you have to start thinking about that as well.
Agreed.
Okay, so I said my piece on the Dover Amendment and the agricultural stuff. So you then sort of go into a back here, specific use regulations. What you're really saying here is that, and many of these are on special permits. So multifamily is allowed on multifamily, and then there's a series of regulations there. And then trailer camps, customary home occupations, these are getting buried in with each other, and they're not always compatible uses. So I don't like to put as of right residential uses like a home occupation with other uses that require a special permit. And it's perfectly fine to have different special permit requirements for different uses that are on special permit. But I'd rather have freestanding sections under special regulations for things like adult uses, for things like just picking out ones that I see here. In-law apartments would be a special residential regulation. And remember that the governor's just made that easier for you if you go along with this definition of an accessory dwelling unit.
Right.
And I just did that for one of the towns. This medical marijuana treatment center would be a special regulation because it's not, you didn't make it into an overlay district. You're treating them as a thing, not a district. So that would be in a separate section. Have you allowed recreational marijuana?
Yes.
Yeah.
So you have regulations for that as well. So I'm going to put these things in a different location in terms of chapter orientation, but I think the regulations are easily understandable. This section on nonconformities is, as I said, woefully short. This is where 75% of your people read the bylaw. That's
right.
They're not interested in wireless. They're not providers. So they're going to try to renovate a house at some point. And as time passes by in virtually every town, lots become bigger, frontage becomes longer, and as a result, the structure, not the lot, the structure is non-conforming. And it's not just non-conforming uses. Your headline doesn't include non-conforming structures. And it doesn't include the third thing that the Section 6 regulates here, which is non-conforming single and two-family structures get their own rules. They're treated much more liberally than a non-conforming, any old non-conforming structure. What I do is try to make everybody's night easier by allowing certain changes to non-conforming structures as of right, because you were going to give them a special permit anyway. So let's just carve those out and make it easier for those people and their neighbors not having to go to the barricades to get an approval. We'll walk through that. This will be part of the first meeting, the next meeting that we have. I cover nonconformities in that first meeting. So you'll actually see the bylaw, and it's got some interesting wrinkles to it that I'm actually having fun playing with right now. I wrote the zoning in Norwood, and I'll tell you the story when we get to the section. But it's you've got to be flexible, because otherwise, if you've got a non-conforming structure in a downtown or a village center, and you need a variance to change it, that's just the wrong approach. Let it change by special permit, but you have to make some accommodations for that. Article 4 on dimensional regulations, I thought was fine. And it'll probably just move over as black in the coding. The one thing I noticed that I'm going to have to scroll for 15 pages here to get past your sign regulations. Do they work?
I would say our building inspector would like to get some revisions.
Okay. I noticed that your political sign regulations were unlawful. Let's just
yes. And everybody, and the building inspector and myself do realize that. And basically, if subject has come up in the last few years since those court decisions, we've said, can't enforce it. Sorry.
Yeah. I'm not worried about Justice Thomas's opinion as much as I am about the St. Louis decision.
Right.
That was the political sign decision.
Right.
Just when the liberal wing of the court says, "What are you trying to do? Make us into the zoning sign board of Supreme Court appeals?" I tend to take that with a grain of salt, and I haven't really seen much fallout from the Thomas opinion. So as I move past your sign regulations at warp speed,
dear God,
this is your floodplain, which looked pretty state of the art to me.
Yeah.
And then I looked at you've got a section on estate lots, so this would be an example of a special residential regulation.
Right.
I did not see the Aquifer Protection District as another special district regulation. This would go in what I would number as section 9. And that looked to be up to snuff. I've done many of these for cities and towns. The DEP guidance documents are pretty much what you have in here. And finally, with regard to, I did not see anything of an alternative nature for residential development. In many towns, instead of falling back on standard subdivision regs, which tend to be cookie cut, they encourage, I call it flexible development. Many towns call it open space residential development. It requires a certain minimum amount of open space, but it also is much more easy. It's much easier to work with, in that you are getting rewarded for protecting the most valuable resource on the property, whether it's a meadow or a forested area or a view corridor. You can move the houses closer together. Some towns have no lot line, no lot requirements for frontage. You don't have to lot it at all if you don't want to. It can be a condominium complex. Obviously, it's going to look a little bit different, so perimeter requirements might be different so that your neighbors don't squawk about it. But I mean, if you want to see something when we get to here, this will be where Judy is key. But I always tell people, Google ConcordRiverWalk.com. Who would not want that in their town? You can't get there from here using your zoning.
Right.
So far, there's been very little interest in doing anything like that. I mean, I'm not saying there's no interest by nobody, but in terms of bringing anything to town meeting, it just hasn't flown any place.
Yeah, I'm doing Berkeley right now at the same time as I'm doing you, and they balked at that, and I've known them for 25 years, so I don't know that they're going to end up with that either, but they don't have any alternative style of development as well. It's in the governor's housing legislation, although I don't think it needed to be there. I think you could do it anyway. So that's my pitch on that. As we head to the back here, I noticed that the Board of Appeals has its own section, but the Planning Board is unmentioned. So I would encourage us to add a separate freestanding section on Planning Board powers, composition. I'm assuming that the Planning Board is chiefly responsible for site plan approval.
Right.
The site plan approval regulation, which I think comes at the very end.
Yeah.
Yeah, is okay. You don't really have a lot of guidance here in terms of how to met. You've got a lot of requirements for submittal, and that's fine. I get that. And then you list various things, and then you talk about protection of adjoining premises, convenience and safety of traffic, adequacy of methods for controlling surface water. I've come to think that instead of these subjective standards, it's better in many cases to have objective standards for things like noise, for things like lighting, for things like landscaping, for things like traffic. And then instead of putting your finger into the wind to decide whether or not it's adequate for any expansion allowed by applicable density standards, you've got a more objective standard to work with.
Right.
So one of the key things that I've done in towns is to encourage them to adopt performance standards for non-residential projects. And it literally covers all of the things I've just mentioned. The thinking has always been that if you've got objective standards for parking and signs, and you certainly do, you should have objective standards for noise and lights. It's not different in terms of the purpose behind the regulation. Notably missing from the site plan section is a lapse provision. How long is it good for? Is it a year, 2 years? Special permits are good for 2 or 3 years. And so one of those two is probably the right answer. And as I pointed out before, one of the things that you're missing here is an appeal provision that would send this to court instead of to the ZBA. Other than that, I thought, it's neatly done and not, helter-skelter. But I think the organization can be much better so that everybody can, when you adopt something new, the temptation in virtually every town is to just plug it onto the end. And I want you to add it to the proper chapter. And I often get, even though I've done it in many towns, I'll pick up a book and I'll see that they added, the flavor of the month to the back instead of going through the effort of putting it in the right place. I usually recommend to towns at this point to add 2 provisions that were not really around 5 or 6 years ago. The first of them is Dover use site plan review. Mm-hmm. I had a case in Marion in which I represented Tabor Academy. They wanted to put in artificial turf and football field lights. Long story short, I asked the building commissioner if I could have Dover protection. He said, no, I'm behind the 8 ball. I'm at the Board of Appeals and I need 4 votes out of 5. And the building inspector is their friend. I would rather come in the door through the planning board and ask for site plan approval. Now I only need 3 votes. And if I don't get what I want, I go to court, not to the Board of Appeals. So I think that's a much more fair way to do it. I'm also an honorary building inspector, and I know the building inspectors don't like to be behind the 8 ball like that. They'd rather have a committee do that kind of work at the outset.
You're an honorary building inspector?
I have been an honorary building inspector for 30 years. Judy.
Mark has done everything, guys. I'm telling you.
But on the bottom of my membership card, which I'll take a picture of and show you, it says asterisk, and it says non-voting member. Yeah. And the other thing I've been very careful to make a recommendation on is reasonable accommodations for protected uses under federal disability statutes. This is a hornet's nest for cities and towns. If you make a mistake, you're really behind the 8 ball.
Right.
And you're in federal district court before you can say boo. And you don't want to be in federal district court on this kind of stuff. So I send it to the ZBA, and the ZBA holds a hearing. And if the reasonable accommodation is in fact reasonable, then it's granted, and that's the end of it without the mess associated with making a mistake. And I'm sure Judy has some stuff that she noticed and would want to throw in as we move, particularly through that 3rd and 4th theme-oriented meeting. And I'll rely on her to get you that material in a timely fashion. Judy, do you want to talk briefly about public participation?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how far you folks want to go with this evening. I mean, that was a wonderful review, Mark. You're always Well, very thorough and very entertaining.
Thank you.
And you have a zillion stories to tell. But I think, I think what we can maybe bring to the table is making sure that some of the groups that you probably want to have at least have some input into the process, if not say, but at least input, that we hear from them early on so that you don't go to town meeting with a rewritten zoning bylaw and people saying things as they do, like, we didn't know this was happening, or no one talked to us, or this just happens in other towns. So, we could, for example, spend some time, and we should at least checking with the planning board, checking with the ZBA, some of the other boards or commissions, conservation too, sometimes, has frustrations with the way zoning is administered, and just be a check-in point for those folks. We can do all kinds of stuff on public participation. I think it really depends on what your town likes, what works in your town, and where at the point in the project it makes sense. We can do remote meetings like this. We could do something in person if you wanted. We've done simple, very low-tech things like putting display boards up around town in the town hall or the library or something with simple questions for people that they can just respond by writing down. We've done what's called a virtual open house, where we're really kind of walking people through some key questions about zoning, about land use, about their experience as residents or business owners. And it's almost like going into a room and seeing people at a discussion center around maybe 5 or 6 key topics, but instead they get to do it online at their own time. So we call it a virtual open house. And those are fun, and people actually like that. And frankly, it's probably more engaging for people than a survey. I think people feel surveyed to death because of COVID. So, so an online, a remote open house, functionally, it's a survey, but it doesn't look like a survey. It looks like you're going from one flip chart to the next, and you're answering with Post-it notes. It's fun, actually. So there's a lot of things we can bring to the table. I think it's really going to depend on maybe some input and direction from you folks about what is going to be most effective in Halifax, and what groups perhaps you think we should be reaching out to the most, because that really varies from town to town. But I mean, we certainly bring a whole suite of things that we can do. I have 5 full-time people here who can support this project as needed. And actually, we just finished up a major community engagement project in the middle of the pandemic for Pioneer Valley Planning Commission out in Western Mass, where they brought us in because we're good at this, and it was fun for the staff, and they did a great job. So I think I'm probably going to play a bit of tag team here with Mark a bit and kind of listen in and see what's going to make the most sense and get some direction from you folks. But I'm assuming at least you're going to want me to talk to the planning board and ZBA and probably Concom early on. And where are they in this whole process? I'm just kind of curious.
Well, good question.
We did send a note out to, at the very least, was ZBA and Planning Board. I know we have one member at least of the ZBA here tonight on the 10-day list. I'm not sure about the Planning Board.
Okay. But
they were aware of tonight's meeting, and the presentation by Mark and you all. I think, yeah. I'll stop there. Let me put it that way. I do think that you're quite right. They need to be in the loop and be participants in this. So
for example, at the next meeting, when I'm talking about nonconformities, it's the ZBA's bread and butter. So I would really like it if as many members of the ZBA can tag along at the next meeting as possible. They don't have to come to the one after that on definitions and use table. Right. But really important for me to get a feel for their experience and to see if they understand where I'm trying to take them.
Well, and Mark, I could even maybe have some consultation with them before that meeting, so I can feed you information that may be helpful to you when you're working on that section. I happen to be on the Board of Appeals in my own town, and I would say probably 90% of what comes before us involves modifications to single-family homes on non-conforming lots. It's just the nature of the beast. As our towns are filling out, as they're gradually getting developed and there's less and less land available, that's the kind of stuff we tend to see.
So one of the things I want to emphasize here, we're starting off, we're calling it a recodification. And I think too many times board members, committee members say, Well, we're just reorganizing it and making it more user-friendly, bringing it up to speed on statutory changes and whatever. We're not. We're adding definitions. Those are major changes. Right? So there is going to be change here. How much change we make is up to you. If you think we're pushing too far, too fast, just say, rein it in. Bridgewater went way out over their skis. I know. And I had to cut the bylaw back. Yeah. After 9 drafts, I had to cut it back. And so now they're back, you know, in a place where politically they can get the council to vote for it. I have a public hearing there next week, and we'll probably wrap up the recodification stage. But the ambitious goals here are not something Judy and I are going to try to run away from. I'd rather see you do major planning objectives that are, you know, certainly tried and tested in other towns your size, than to just have me retype the thing. So that, keep those in mind. But don't be afraid to tell us that we're pushing too far out too fast.
Mm-hmm.
Mark and Judy, thank you. Any other comments before I'd open it up to the committee, see if they have any questions for you?
Go right ahead.
Nothing right now. Thanks for your time.
Okay. Anyone else? Anyone else from the other committees or from just other members of the community that joined? Any questions for Mark or Judy? Okay.
When did you say your next meeting was, Mr. Chairman? When you went through the schedule there?
The 28th of July, and then we'll be doing the 12th and 26th. I'm sorry, 28th of June, sorry, and then the 12th and 26th of July. And for your second meeting, do you want to use one of those dates, Mark?
Do you have time for me on the 28th, or is your agenda too full?
I think that agenda's, that meeting even is contingent. So I think probably the next one on the 9th would be the first opportunity.
That's the 9th of July?
Charlie?
No, the 12th.
12th of July, yes. Thanks, Cheryl.
That's a Monday. That works for me just fine, I think. Yep, it works for me just fine.
Just so you're aware, I don't know how long your discussion on the 12th is going to be about this. The ZBA does meet that night. So if there are things that you want to discuss that, as you mentioned, the nonconformity provisions, that should be early in the hour between 6 and 7.
That's fine. I can do that. There's no reason why I can't just make their schedule work. So we'll do it first.
That's the 12th of July. I just want to make sure I get this to my calendar.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Charlie, is there anything else that we should consider? So we'll make that first on the agenda.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that we consider?
Just other than, you know, and I'll get the message out to everybody that we're continuing the work. If Mark can give sort of, you know, what's going to be covered on the 12th, so we just give people a heads up, like the nonconformity issues.
Yeah, I'll send you a memo really quickly, Charlie, on the topics to be covered. But then 1 week to 10 days before, I'll give you some actual sample sections that I'm going to substitute. For example, okay. Section 1, you're going to see a brand new Section 1. Right. You'll see a brand new Section 10 on administrative procedures as well.
Okay. Well, thank you both, and thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you.
We hope I try to make this as enjoyable as possible. If I'm not doing my job, let me know.
We will do that. Thank you.
You bet.
Have a good meeting, folks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Okay. Any public comments, public participation? Any other business? Linda, have we covered everything we had on the agenda tonight? Okay. Then I'd like to ask for a motion to adjourn. It is 7:20 on 6/21.
So moved.
Second.
Great. A roll call vote. Cheryl?
Yes.
Drew?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
And John?
Yes.
Joe's left, and I'm a yes. So meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everyone, for your time this evening.
Good night, folks.
Good night.
Thank you.
Bye.